Today, I'm going to take you back 5,000 years to the muddy lands of Mesopotamia and show you a horrifying truth that lies at the foundation of modern economics. What we call money was born not as a solution, but as a byproduct of a much bigger problem. Here's what you'll learn in this video: why money was invented, how the concept of debt is older than our monetary system, why ancient kings regularly wiped out all debts, and that dark secret modern economics never tells you. Are you ready? Because this journey will completely change your perspective on your wallet. Let's get started. Our story begins in 3500 BCE in Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers meet. This geography is where humanity first began urbanizing, where the first writing and the first laws were created. But do you know what else entered human life from here? The first debt crisis. What have you always been told? Remember your school years. This geography is where humanity first began urbanizing, where the first writing and the first laws were created. There used to be barter, then money was invented. Blah, 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 blah. You remember, don't you? Here's the shocking truth. This is completely wrong. American anthropologist and historian David Graeber's years of research, documented in his book, Debt, the First 5,000 Years, revealed that a barter economy never existed. So why has this myth been told to you for years? Because the truth is much more disturbing. The economy didn't begin with free people bartering goods with each other, but with debt. Climb to the roof of a building and look around. You'll see shiny, glamorous skyscrapers. But when you descend to the building's foundations, you see damp basements, cracking columns, rusted pipes. That's where the real economy is hiding, in those decayed foundations. Do you know what the first clay tablets in Mesopotamia say? Shopping lists? Poems? Definitely not these. Debt records. How much barley a farmer owes to the temple, how much silver a soldier will pay to the palace, how much service a family must provide in exchange for water usage, and the list goes on and on. Now let's go to 2400 BCE, to the city of Lagash. Do you know what King Enmetena did first when he ascended to the throne? He erased all debts. Yes, you heard that right. The king turned the debts of farmers, craftsmen, ordinary people into ash. This was called amargi, the Sumerian word for return to freedom. This was history's first known debt forgiveness. And this wasn't a one-time event. Between 2400 BCE and 1400 BCE, a total of 30 general debt cancellations took place in Mesopotamia. Nearly every time a new king ascended to the throne, they would issue a decree called the Clean Slate. Debt records carved into clay tablets would literally be washed with water, crushed, and reused. But why? Why would kings eliminate their treasury's source of income like this? The answer is shockingly pragmatic and simple. Of course, to survive. Because they knew what would happen to society if they allowed debt to grow limitlessly. Imagine this. You're a farmer in Babylon in 1750 BCE. There's a drought, your harvest went badly. To avoid starvation, you borrow barley from the temple. A year later, you need to pay back that barley, plus 33% interest. Yes, you heard right, 33% interest. Modern credit cards aren't this ruthless, but what if next year's harvest also goes badly? Your debt doubles. Third year, triples. You can't pay anymore. What do? You mortgage your land. Then you give your wife as a servant in exchange for debt. Then your children. Finally, even you become a debt slave. And this isn't just happening to you. Everyone in your village is in the same situation. Hundreds, thousands of people are losing their lands, losing their freedom. So what's the king's problem? Very simple. If all the farmers become debt slaves, who will provide soldiers for the army? Who will pay taxes? Who will work the fields? The moneylenders are getting rich, but the kingdoms are reaching the point of collapse. Economist Michael Hudson's research shows that ancient Mesopotamian kings understood this very well. Debt, if not controlled, was a cancer-rotting society from the inside. What was their solution? Periodic cleaning. Each new king's ascension to the throne became a jubilee year. Mosherum, justice and balance. All agricultural debts were erased. Debt slaves were freed. Mortgaged lands were returned to their owners. Society was reset to factory settings. And guess what happened? The economy didn't collapse. On the contrary, it revived. Let's pause for a moment. If what I've told you so far seems strange, Here comes the really shocking part. The real revolution here is this. In Mesopotamia, money wasn't invented to solve the debt system. Debt already existed. Records on clay tablets, debt ledgers carved in cuneiform, those weight units. These were all inventories showing how debt was tracked. The currency, silver shekels, was used as a unit of account even before actual silver existed. So money was born not as a medium of exchange, but as a debt measurement tool. Think about it. Everything you're taught in modern economics books hides this fundamental truth. They tell you first barter, then money, then banking. But the real sequence is this: first debt, then money, then a system we can't control. And that's why we're still in the same cycle today. Now, with your permission, I want to tell you a surprising anecdote from 1750 BCE. We're going to the city of Ur, a clay tablet found here. This tablet is perhaps known as the first customer complaint in history. A man named Nani writes to a merchant named Ea Nasir. "When you came, you told me, 'I will give you quality copper ingots.' But the copper you gave me turned out to be poor quality. You put bad ingots in front of my messenger and said, 'Take it if you want, leave if you don't.' What do you think I am that you treat me with such contempt? No other merchant trading with Telman has treated me like this. What does this 4,000-year-old complaint show us? There was trade, yes. But more importantly, there were debt relationships, there was trust, there were reputation systems. And all of these were working when metal money wasn't even around yet. The economy wasn't a simple exchange of goods. It was a complex network of social relationships, and at its center was debt. Here comes the critical question. If ancient Mesopotamian kings knew how to solve debt crises, why don't we know today? Why don't modern economies practice regular debt forgiveness? The answer lies hidden in the Roman Empire. In 509 BCE, the monarchy in Rome was overthrown and replaced by oligarchy. That is, power was no longer in the hands of kings who protected the people, but had passed into the hands of the wealthy creditor class. And guess what happened? The tradition of debt forgiveness died. Wealthy Romans preferred to enslave the poor rather than forgive their debts. All those peasant uprisings in Roman history, the murder of the Gracchus brothers, the civil wars, they all stemmed from the same fundamental problem: uncontrolled debt and land concentration. And what was the result? The Roman Empire collapsed. The moneylenders are getting rich, but the kingdoms are reaching the point of collapse. Economist Michael Hudson explains it like this: the wrong kings were overthrown in Rome. In their place came not kings who would protect the people, but oligarchs who would exploit them. And at precisely this point, Western civilization took a wrong turn. Mesopotamia's 2,000-year sustainable debt management system was forgotten. In its place, the idea that debt could never be forgiven, that it must always be attempted to be paid, took hold. And this idea turned into a religious dogma. You know, don't you, that in many languages the word debt and the word sin are the same? In Hebrew, hova means both debt and sin. In German, Schuld the same way. What does Jesus say in the Christian Pater Noster prayer? Forgive us our debts, as we forgive those who are indebted to us. Yes, not our sins, but our debts. The word is clear in the original Greek and Hebrew texts, ophilema, debt. But later translators changed this word to sin. Why? Because the subject of Jesus' first sermon was precisely this: the Jubilee year, the year of debt forgiveness. When he opened the scroll of the prophet Isaiah, what did he say? I have come to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. This was the Jubilee law written in Leviticus, the holy year when every 49 years all debts would be erased, slaves would be freed, lands would return to their former owners. Jesus was reminding people of this promise that carried the Mesopotamian tradition into Jewish law. But look, how do churches interpret this sermon today? Spiritual freedom, forgiveness in a metaphorical sense. No. What Jesus was talking about was quite concrete: the erasure of debts, the restoration of economic justice. So can you see the big picture here? Our modern economic system constantly tells you a lie. The history of money is this: people bartered goods, then money was invented, then banks were established, and now we're all happy and free. If you believe it. But the truth is this: the economy didn't begin with freedom, but with dependency. The first economic relationship wasn't an agreement between two equal parties, but an unjust distribution of power. The temple and palace gave the farmer seeds and water, and the farmer paid part of the harvest as tax. This seems simple, but what if the harvest goes badly? That's when debt was born, and debt grew, and the system reached the point of collapse. Mesopotamian kings understood this and made periodic resets. Rome ignored this and collapsed. Today us? We're walking the same path and seem to have forgotten history's lessons. Now think about the 2008 crisis. What happened? Banks overlent, the financial system collapsed. Governments intervened and provided billions of dollars in bailout packages. But who did this money go to? Banks, that is, creditors. Not the millions of homeowners who were in debt. In 2008, 10 million people in America lost their homes. They couldn't make mortgage payments, their homes were foreclosed. Just like that farmer in Babylon. Just like that peasant in Rome. But nobody came out and declared a clean slate. Nobody said Masharum. Because in the modern system, creditors are sacred and debts are eternal. And here, the truly horrifying truth emerges. There was a system in Mesopotamia that was sustainable for 2,000 years. In Rome, this system collapsed, and the empire disintegrated in 500 years. Our system. We've only been living with modern capitalism for 300 years, and we've already seen three major crises: the 1929 Great Depression, the 2008 financial crisis, and the global debt bubble we're currently experiencing. Mesopotamian kings had seen the problem. If you allow debt to grow continuously, ultimately, the system collapses. Either you reset periodically, or society fragments. Simple mathematics. If growth in an economy is 3% per year but average interest is 5%, debt always grows faster than the economy. Eventually, the entire economy turns into a hamster wheel, trying to pay debt. Production stops, people become impoverished, social tension explodes, and at precisely this point, I ask you, why don't they teach us these things in schools? Why do they always tell us the barter myth in economics classes? Why isn't the history of debt shown as the history of power? The answer is disturbing. Because if you learn the truth, if you question the system, you start to create question marks about the system. You ask, why should my student loan control my life for 30 years? You ask, why should I work like a slave for 20 years to buy a house? You ask, why does a country borrow from private banks when it prints its own money? And these questions shake the system's foundations. Because modern economics is, at its core, a belief system. Debts must be paid. This has become an unquestionable axiom, like religious dogmas. But look at ancient Mesopotamia. They didn't see this as dogma. They saw it as a pragmatic problem. The solution, the reset button. So why do you think China's economy has grown so fast over the last 40 years? One of the answers is this. In China, banks are state-owned. So like in Mesopotamia, the creditor class can't form an independent oligarchy. The state can inject liquidity into banks when necessary, can erase bad loans. And yes, in China, land also still belongs to the state. Citizens only have usage rights, just like in ancient Mesopotamia. Does this system have problems? Of course it does. But the lesson here is this: alternative models are possible. They tell us, there's no other way, the market is always right, debt is sacred. But history tells us a completely different story. Mesopotamia tells us an economy should serve society, not society serving the economy. If debt enslaves people, to solve the problem you should choose human freedom, not the sanctity of debt. Now let's come to you, my viewers. Thank you to everyone who has stayed with me to this point. If this video has given you a different perspective, please like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications, because in upcoming videos, we'll examine money's other hidden faces. And write this in the comments. Do you think modern societies should practice periodic debt forgiveness? Or is this an immoral idea? Let's discuss, because this topic isn't just academic curiosity, it's a topic that affects all of our lives, shapes our wallets, our homes, our futures. And if we don't learn history's lessons, we're doomed to repeat the same mistakes. And now let's return to that building. While looking at the building's glamorous facade, we forget the cracked columns underneath. While looking at modern economics' glittering face, we don't smell the stench of decayed debt in its foundation. But that farmer in Mesopotamia knew. That peasant in Rome knew. That family who lost their home in 2008 knew. And now you know too, money isn't a symbol of freedom. Money, from the beginning of its history, is debt in disguise. And this debt, if not controlled, rots society from the inside out. Mesopotamian kings understood this and discovered the clean slate. Roman oligarchs rejected this and the empire collapsed. Us, what will we do in the 21st century? That's the real question. And one more final truth for you. Today the world's total debt exceeds 350% of global gross domestic product. That is, the world is drowning in debt 3.5 times what it produces. Is this sustainable? Mathematical science says no. History says no. Mesopotamian kings say no. But what do modern economists say? Don't worry, we can handle it with growth. But what if growth stops? What if we've reached resource limits? What if, even after consuming everything on the planet, we still can't pay the debt? What happens then? Perhaps that ancient wisdom known in Mesopotamia 5,000 years ago should be rediscovered today. Some debts shouldn't be paid, some resets should be made. Because life is more valuable than tablets. Human dignity is more sacred than finance, and society's health is more important than the creditor's profit. Now think. If Jesus returned today and entered a synagogue and opened Isaiah's scroll, proclaimed the year of the Lord's favor, that is, debt forgiveness, what would world leaders say? What would the IMF say? What would central banks say? They would probably crucify him, just as they did 2,000 years ago, because he would have exposed the system's deepest lie. Debt is not a moral obligation, but a political choice. And history shows us that other choices are also possible. There was a system that worked for 2,000 years in the past. Mesopotamia's clean slate tradition kept society standing, made kings strong, left people free. But this system was forgotten in Rome. It was distorted by the church in the Middle Ages. It was banned by capitalism. And today, it's told to us as if it never existed. But now you know. And knowledge may not erase your debt, but it gives you the power to think freely. It gives you the courage to ask questions. It gives you the ability to see the lies that the system itself doesn't even believe. Because if the system were truly fair, why were banks saved in 2008 but not people? If morality really matters, why is global corporations' tax evasion forgiven but a young person? Who can't pay student debt can't even declare bankruptcy? If responsibility is so sacred, why didn't any of the bankers who sold subprime mortgages go to jail? The answer is simple. Because the rules are written for the powerless, not the powerful. And it's been this way for 5,000 years. Mesopotamian kings were the exception. They changed the rules so the system wouldn't collapse. But since Rome, rules exist only to protect the powerful's power. And here's one final thought I want to leave you with. What will we tell future generations? Will we tell them, sorry, we left you a huge debt, we depleted the planet's resources, we destroyed the climate, but don't worry, you too can be happy by paying installments for 30 years? Or will we show the courage of Mesopotamian kings and say, no, this system is wrong, let's reset, let's start over? The choice is yours. But now you know that history offers you an alternative. A solution was found 5,000 years ago. Perhaps in the 21st century, the time for that ancient wisdom has come again. Perhaps the clean slate should be digital today. Perhaps the Jubilee year should be proclaimed with algorithms, but the essential issue is this. Either humanity controls debt, or debt controls humanity. And this isn't just an economic matter. This is a matter of civilization's future. That's all from me for today. See you in the next video. And remember, money is just pieces of paper, but debt is an invisible prison sentence that chains your mind, your freedom, your future. Mesopotamia knew this. Now you know it too. The question is, what will you do with this knowledge?